Hello and welcome to episode 18 of Friends from Film School, a Sozo Bear podcast. I'm Luke Pilgrim.
I'm Brad Kennedy.
And I'm Ellis Treese.
So on this episode, we have our very special friend, Ryan Littman. You might recognize him from pretty much almost all of our short films that we've ever done. The Apology Service, Sunnyside Drive, and The Amazing Anti-Fart Formula. And you may have seen him in web series and Amazon Prime shows like Morty. Let's see what else you got. Murder Decoded, Rich Man, Poor Man, or many commercials like the Moe's Burrito commercial.
That was a cool commercial, by the way.
That was a really cool commercial.
Yeah.
That was a fun shoot.
Yeah, we were just watching that before you got on.
Cool.
So, welcome to the show, Ryan.
Thanks, you guys. Thanks for having me.
This is cool. I was excited when you told me you had been listening to it because, you're like someone we know really closely, and you said you enjoyed it. So I was like, well, that's cool. That's a good sign. So, I was thinking we could just kind of go back a little bit. We talk about how you got into film, acting, got into filmmaking, all that kind of stuff. Talk about when we met, which has been a long time ago. I know it was we were talking about, we had Woody Brown as a guest on the show, and it was kind of a similar situation where I've known him for 17 years. I think that's probably the same with you when you say 2003 or 4 or something like that.
If not earlier, yeah.
Were you in high school or were you in college?
I'm trying to remember if I was either in my senior year of high school or my first year. No, I think it was the first year of college.
I think it might have been because I was maybe you're a few years older than me. I was probably a sophomore or junior or something in high school. And just to clarify what we're talking about, Ryan and I both played in 2 different bands. We were both the frontmen, the singers for our bands. And we ended up playing a bunch of shows together, whatever kind of skating rinks and birthday parties or whatever we were playing at, at the time. And we played a Battle of the Bands, I think, once. Is that where I met you? Is that it?
I remember was it at a mall or something?
Oh yeah. Grayson or something like that. Or was that the high school? I don't know. We played with you guys at Battle of the Bands.
I don't know.
Well, anyways, so that was sort of when our paths first crossed. And then we basically lost touch for 10 years. Literally 10 years. And then what was kind of crazy, and this has happened, it seems to a lot of people, they go from this music world into the film world, which I think is pretty interesting. And I guess maybe there's some parallels or there's some similar creative vibes that are happening or something. But so I guess what happened with you? I mean, actually, I'd love to hear too, just growing up, when you were a kid, what that was like. If you had, did you have any inkling that you wanted to be an actor, or because obviously you went into music just like I did, and then kind of went into acting later. What was that like when you were growing up? And were your parents were they supportive of that kind of stuff? Were they did people see you as a personality, when you were a kid, or was that something you kind of grew into?
Oh, well, yes and no. As a kid, I definitely had an ability to kind of just get riled up and be stupid and entertaining and crazy and stuff. But I also had a really introverted, shy side and stuff. So there was kind of and I've heard this from a lot of actors actually, around they'll entertain their family and figure out what, they do well or something like that. And so to an extent, growing up, everybody around me always enjoyed, I would do plays and stuff like that.
In the backyard or in the living room or something?
Or middle school.
Or actual plays?
More school plays and stuff. But I did I got a, little cheap video camera real young, and I would make little movies around the house and stuff. Everybody loved that. So, Yeah, I don't think that anybody besides me ever really like considered it like something that I would do with my life or like try to like pursue as a career or something. So on that front, I felt, I don't want to say that like my family like didn't support me or something, but like there was definitely a lot of encouragement to just like go in a more, you know, what people call serious direction.
Right.
So like, yeah. And like going back to like, you know, how I felt about how I wanted to get into it and everything. Like I have known that I wanted to be an actor from a pretty young age. Like I remember when Home Alone came out, I was around Macaulay Culkin's age, and like I just watched the movie like back to back constantly, like memorized every line. And then so, like my friends and I were like putting on the movie and then acting it out how it played.
Yeah.
And then like, you know, I just remember like growing up and like I kept seeing movies and like admiring the actors. And I remember like I saw True Lies and I was like, man, I want to be a secret agent. And then after like, watching it a couple times, I was like, wait a second. Play a secret agent in a movie. That's probably not what it's really like.
There you go.
Yeah. And then like, I think the music thing was sort of just seemed way more of an accessible outlet for some of the things like that were inspiring me to just, you know, try creative things, you know, because like it's relatively easy to get a group of, you know, people together in high school or something. Like everybody wants to start a band.
Yeah. Do you think it's different now with like the YouTube generation? Because I imagine that might be a similar situation for you, Luke, right? Where it was like the accessibility of being able to make music was easier than making movies. Like, do you think that's kind of changed where more of these people now, you know, might not go the music route, but just keep on through the filmmaking route?
Yeah.
I would think so. Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like because of for instance, when we were kids, you mentioned having the camcorder. That was basically it, you know, like we didn't have like editing software. It was kind of like, well, I guess I'll shoot this in order and then hopefully it kind of works out, you know, like you mess up, you're like, I got to rewind this tape and try to record on top of it.
Well, I feel like the thing too with filmmaking at a young age would be, it was harder to get people to be as committed to it for a longer time. Whereas like making music, like you could have a band of like, you know, 3 or 4 guys, but you could also make music by yourself if you know, had no one to pull from. Also,
dude, people, like you mentioned, being committed to it, you see more instant results with the music because girls start paying attention to you because you're playing guitar or whatever. You put out the music, you play a show, and like some kids know the words, like, and you're like, whoa, okay, I'm like instantly that like satisfaction is there that you were searching for, you know. Whereas you make a movie, you might like, who's gonna see it when you're a kid? Maybe your family, and you're like, well, that was cool. Everyone like said it was good, but like
and the admiration of girls really tips the scale.
Right, exactly.
A lot of like young people too that are in high school, their inspiration for like making movies is more like how YouTube is kind of set up now, how more like YouTubers kind of have their channels set up. It's almost like Twitch streaming and other people being like, hey man, what's up guys? And that kind of, instead of like traditional filmmaking, which like almost no one's going to see that on YouTube nowadays. It's like so oversaturated. So I completely agree that.
So it's probably still getting that instant gratification then.
Yeah, I would say that if you're in music, you're going to get that instant gratification versus if you're making movies for YouTube or something like that, it's not going to be quite the same. I still feel like that there's kind of parallels to like when you were just having like the little handheld like video recorder versus making YouTube videos nowadays, because they don't have the proper training on how to make real like cinematic films and
and it's probably it's kind of like few and far between that you have the guys that are like the outliers that really stand out on YouTube, the ones that are like that blow up, and like Logan Paul or some whatever, you know what I mean? They start like as a kid, but then they explode but that's kind of that's not everybody, you know? So
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry for the aside, Ryan. Get back to your backstory.
Thought for sure. Like, it's definitely more accessible than before. Like, I wonder, you know, like being a kid now, like would I have done that instead?
Yeah. 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 So what about, let's see. So where do we get to? So you're like, as a kid doing that, what about when you started? So I guess when we kind of parted ways, like we just kind of lost touch, you went to college.
Or you went to film school.
But you were in film school. Tell us about your film school experience, because we're always curious about that. Since this is friends from film school, we're always curious. I mean, ours might have been a little different, I think, than a lot of people's, because it was in North Georgia at, you know, a place not really known for filmmaking. Whereas actually yours was probably a more well-known filmmaking program, I guess. Tell us a little bit about that, what it was like, you know, did you, as far as just that creative experience, you know, like, did you have a lot of collaboration working with other people, stuff like that?
Yeah. So, I'm lucky in that I got to see a little bit of what the experience was like for you guys while you were in school, you know, working on acting in your senior project. And what I noticed, my film school experience, and like it was a few years before as well, so I don't know how it's evolved there, but it was very heavily focused on like theory and aesthetics. So it was a lot of writing and papers, and we had, you know, production and everything, but honestly, like, it was this moment when the technology was changing so fast. Like, you could learn how to use all the newest stuff, and the next year nobody used it anymore. So it's kind of like production classes, I felt like took a little bit of a hit in that respect. So I really only had a handful of production classes. We did do, you know, we collaborated with every student, worked with everybody else, that kind of thing, and it was super cool. But in the end, I felt like I learned a lot more about like understanding what I'm seeing when I watch a film than creating it. And like, you guys learned a lot more about the creation of it, which I was kind of jealous of. I thought that was much better, honestly.
Yeah.
So what years were you in film school, if you were saying that technology was changing so quickly?
2004 to 2000. I graduated in 2007.
Okay. So like that's right when, like, you know, kind of moving from DV to like HD video, digital side, right?
Yeah. So like when I started my editing class, they still had actual like setups to like cut film.
Oh, wow.
And they were literally like taking them out and setting up computers, and like we were like the first to use like Final Cut in class instead of manually like cut film and stuff, which I'm so sad I missed learning how to do.
That actually would be so cool to learn.
Wow. So sorry, Brad, did you have more to that?
No, I was just going to say I wish that would still be an option for college editing courses, and probably somewhere big like USC or, you know, somewhere might have that ability, but I bet that's so expensive. And they were just like, yes, we can do it so much cheaper with Final Cut.
Yeah. And they're like, I guess it's just that you have to think about the curriculum, like what are these kids going to use when they get out of here? And probably like that nobody's going to be editing on film most likely. And so they're trying to teach what's the most broad thing that students can go out and
think about the people who graduated like right before you, or like, you know, a few years before you got to take that class. They probably had only experience in cutting like actual film, and now they're in the real world and people are asking them, hey, do you know Avid or Final Cut or Adobe Premiere? And they're like, no. There's
probably a couple of people like Quentin Tarantino that's looking for people who can still cut traditional film.
Yeah, the skill's kind of more valuable in a weird way, but it's not in demand at all.
Yeah,
they probably, I guess those people had to learn on their own, I guess, if they wanted to stay in the film world.
Well, like speaking of learning on your own, so if your college career was more theory based, like you're such a good actor, how did you have to kind of teach yourself or get the experience just being on set on how to really get into the headspace of a character? Like, for example, on the fart formula, you didn't even have lines, but you did such a good job emoting your character's thoughts and emotions. So how did you kind of pick up that experience and that skill set?
Thank you, first of all. I have kind of this like theory that, like, to some extent, if you're not really good at something, you can usually still do it really well if you do it really, really slowly. So that's not to say the more experience I have, like, the less time I need to prepare for a character or something like that. But, you know, like I remember going back beyond the fart formula, like, you know, the first thing we did together was the apology service. And, like, you know, y'all gave me that script and I just like destroyed that script just with notes, everything just like going over and over and over it again.
Yeah.
I think I still have a page of that saved, honestly.
Really?
Yeah.
That's cool.
But, like, I knew I didn't have the experience to, like, you know, like I knew with my level of experience, I needed to kind of obsess over it for a while. Mm-hmm. So, like, that's kind of like, and this is like my own sort of weird, like, personal approach. Not to say there aren't like, for example, like, taking classes is always a wonderful way to learn new approaches, new ways of thinking about things and new perspectives. I've always been like more of a self-learner, I feel like. So yeah, for me, it's just about like, just slowly kind of like over and over again, like exploring something, trying it out. And then, you know, self-taping auditions can be helpful doing that over and over again, because you get to know yourself very well from an external viewpoint. And you can see, like, you know, your quirks or something that you're doing, like, just completely because maybe I have like some kind of internal thing that has nothing to do with the script that makes me kind of like, you know, like raise my lip every once in a while or something. So, like, once I'm very aware of that, you know, like, I'll kind of like start cutting it out. And that's just an example of like honing in on little things. But, like, for me, it's just like, I'm slow at learning and getting good at things, but I feel like I'm very thorough. So, and like I feel like I'm butchering this like answer here because it's so nebulous. Like, I don't know one exact way to answer that, but like, I just say, go slow and spend a lot of time until you get good at something.
Well, I mean, it's kind of like the 10,000 hours, theory, like that's kind of a similar thing. You're just talking about, the speed at which you're approaching it, but it's still like you're having to just put in a ton of time to find what what your method is and what your style is and how you get to that headspace and all those things. And I think that's going to be different for probably every actor. You could take classes like you're saying, and they'll definitely help. Because like we work with Drama Inc. a lot, and I know you've worked, you know those guys really well too. That's where we found a lot of actors lately, and obviously those classes are working for them because that's really super talented people are coming out of that. And but still, I'm sure they're still like get on set, and then they're like, some of it goes out the window. Some of it's like, I need to figure this out now. How does this apply to me or to what I'm actually figuring out,
Yeah, that's a good segue to a question I had is like, how often, talking about preparing for a role, once you get to set, like, are there moments where you're like, oh, everything I did in preparation almost is no longer applies because the shot wasn't framed up like I thought, or, the scene isn't flowing quite the way I thought it would. Like, how much of acting is like once you get on set having to be on your toes?
The director's all of a sudden like, now you're going to be a cat. Go.
Yeah. Well, like, I guess, you know, from my experience, I definitely believe in being, like, for me, and this is part of my personality, like, I need to be on my toes, like, pretty much all the time. Just because otherwise I'll start psyching myself out or get nervous and be like, uh-oh, I don't know what's going on, like, blah, blah. And then I'll get, like, over into it and just like start examining kind of everything. But like, you know, yeah, kind of an example, I guess, of a time that I was like way off on something was actually, I'd like gone over the script. This thing had like so many lines. I'd had to study the script so much. But the first shot we did that day, my character is sort of in like this, like, kind of depressed fog daze. He's just laying on his bed, like in his boxer shorts, staring at the ceiling. And so, you know, I thought like a lot about like all the feelings that I would maybe have, or maybe even the lack of feeling I would have, what I was thinking. And so I'm laying there and it's like an extremely close shot that pulls out. And we did it. And the director was like, Ryan, you look like you're dead. You have to do something. And I was just like, oh, I just realized I'd just completely done it all internally and didn't even show nothing happened. I just, and so like, yeah, I realized I had practiced like kind of like getting in the mindset, but not really like thinking about the fact that like we're shooting something and you have to be able to see it too. And like, which is weird. Wow. It makes me think about like the technical side of stuff. Like, you know, like you need like, maybe in real life you would turn around and do something, but you know, you got to like make sure the camera can still see your face if you're shooting.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like, yeah, there have definitely been times, it's hard to think of exact examples, but like, and it's hard if you like almost like over practice a part. And then like someone wants something like super different, like you kind of have to break out of like what you were in almost.
Yeah.
Yeah, it can be hard. And like, that's where like really clear direction is super helpful too. There's one other example I'll give, which was like before I was even acting, I was body doubling on this show. And I was just like, somebody opens this thing and like an arm flops out and I was doubling the dead body. And so my arm like flopped out. And they cut and the director was like, okay, that's good, but just like more of a flop. And so I was like, oh, okay. And so like, I just like let my arm be like a dead fish, just flopped it. And then she was like, okay, cut. That was really good. Just flop it even more. I was like, what do you mean exactly by flop? And she just, I swear, just kept being like, you know, just like a flop, just flop it. And like, just kept saying the same word.
Right. Yeah.
The direction would have been super good because I didn't know what I looked like.
Yeah.
Right.
Know what a flop looked like in her mind versus my mind. And like, I don't know. These are just, yeah.
That's always like, that's a tough part of directing is like, you kind of have to have some verbal skills where it's like, if that word's not resonating with the person, you can't just say flop again. You got to be like, okay, how am I going to communicate this in a different way? Because
a different adverb
kind of. You're just like flop, and then I just keep saying flop. You're not going to get anywhere.
Yeah. If I add more emphasis to flop, maybe he'll get it.
Really flop, you know?
So, go ahead, Luke.
No, you can go ahead.
I was gonna just ask. Do you have any sort of like warm-ups or like ritual or anything that you do before like you go into a role? So a lot of actors like listen to music to kind of get into the headspace. Do you have any sort of warm-ups that you do that you can recommend to other actors if you do?
Yeah, so I've tried different things. I've tried listening to music and stuff, and like for me, I don't know that really like helped all that much. But really, like, the best stuff that I've found, I think recently, that helps me a lot is just to try to get to like blank slate mode right before the shot, which I think I read in a Stanislavski book, but it was saying you need to be overly relaxed before the shot, like unrealistically almost relaxed. So like, and that's interesting because then you don't bring outside tension in. Your tension starts from the scene. So like, you know, if there's a scene and I'm sitting in a chair right now, if I'm going to be talking with someone, I might even just kind of like really slouch and get super comfortable right before the shot. And then another thing that I've started doing is I just kind of like blow out my lips and let my face totally relax. So it's just like a little like, and then it's action, and then I start to come to life or whatever. And like, surprisingly, that has been like the most helpful thing. It's not much of a warm-up, it's something you do in a few seconds before the shot, but like, and then I remember thinking back other actors that I've seen, you know, on bigger sets before while I was doing like stand-in work and stuff. I remember like seeing this one guy just like blinking his eyes really hard over and over again before every shot. And like, I think maybe he realized he had a twitch where he like blinks his eyes a lot or something. So he would just try to like work it out. I didn't know exactly what he was doing, but yeah, so there's that. And then the other thing is just like, I try to make time for just a little quiet meditation beforehand. Just to, you know, let anything go, maybe that needs to go, process stuff.
Yeah.
To kind of like understand where I'm at that day. Like, am I in like maybe a little bit more of like a frustrated state, or like, am I in like a really like fun, silly state? You know, maybe another state would be better that day, but to know where you're coming from, you know, also to relax and sort of gain a little better flow. That helps with that. So
I was kind of like, made me think about auditions, you know. I'd love to hear about that, like what that experience is like for you, and you know, how that's changed during the pandemic and things like that. But what I always think about though is when you came to audition for the Apology Service, and we hardly ever do in-person auditions, and I imagine a lot of yours are taped anyways too, right? Like nowadays, but we did. You know, you came up to my apartment at the time, and
which is right here now.
That's where Brad lives now. But we like, you know, you had to do this really emotional scene where you had to cry over your dead robot, you know, in the script. We didn't have anything for you to act with. And so you used a rolled up yoga mat that was about the right height and got into character, you know, hugged that thing and just cried over it. And it was so awesome because we were like, we were like, he's definitely right for the part. And like, it was so cool because he committed to this like ridiculous scenario. It's already like, the story's already like, oh, you're crying over your dead robot friend. But now it's even more crazy because we're in this apartment.
Yeah.
And
I think the craziest part too was like, Luke, you and Ryan had met for like lunch or dinner, you know, so, and maybe a week or two before, got kind of reconnected, and then you were like, hey, let's have an audition with Ryan. You know, you told him about the part. So I think that audition that day was like the first time I think I had met you, Ryan, honestly.
Yeah.
So I imagine that might have been even more strange to like, you know, you're doing this really emotional scene with, you know, Luke, a guy that I've only seen like once or twice since like 10 years. And then this new guy. And then I know Luke, your wife, Carrie, was there. So it's just,
I think Zach Gove was there too.
Yeah. Oh yeah. You and Zach went through that, the scene.
They read lines together.
Yeah.
Zach was in the Apology Service as well. And, that was such a fun time, man. It was so cool reconnecting and everything. And I felt like we knew you were like right for the part too. And I knew because I was just like, dude, I could not stop laughing all the time. We were like having such a good time. But when we went to Ted's or whatever for dinner, man, dude, it was the worst. It was like I had like something wrong with my brain. I laughed so much. It was great, man. Because they have this powdered soap, and Ryan said, I was like, it's not scented, and he was like, yeah, I can still smell my hamburger actually, and that set me off. And like I can't even explain that story to people because I'm like, it doesn't make sense. I don't know why it was so funny, but we definitely had a connection for sure, and we were like, I knew it was going to be cool. And when you read the script too later, I don't know if it was that night or whatever, but you texted and you like teared up a little just reading the script. So I knew you definitely got what we were going for. So then I guess it was like the next week you came to do that audition, which was a pretty cool experience. And we definitely tell people about that when they talk about audition experiences, because that was a pretty crazy one. Yeah. But tell us about, like what your auditions have been like, obviously since then, but do you do many of them where you have to go in and get called back and stuff? Are the most of them taped? How does that work?
Yeah. So the vast majority are taped. I probably do more than 95% taped auditions. Maybe around 95%. I don't know. But it's funny because I think that was among the first auditions I did, actually, the one for you guys. And that was crazy because, it was in person in that room, and there was like a group of people in the room with me and everything. But so that it turned out is very different than taping an audition, because it's weird. Acting on the camera for an audition is different actually than acting on the camera in an actual shoot. You have one camera in one spot every time. You usually have one person that you can use as an eye line, and you'll either have to set up, fake eye lines somewhere else or whatever. And, your world is all around you, but you basically have to pretend it's within kind of this little circle.
Yeah.
So that they can see you. They have to be able to see your eyes and all of that, So getting good, actually, getting into it, I always at first went and got my auditions taped professionally. But since I've put together a little kind of studio setup and learned to do it myself, and being able to do that allowed me to practice the audition side of things a lot and just hone in on what I was trying to do. So playing to the camera and sort of implying your world almost is sort of the game of the audition. You almost have to make them see your world by you seeing it for them. That's sort of been my experience with the video auditioning. And then, but lately they've been doing stuff they're okay, we know you're in your home. We're auditioning someone for a scene of a karate instructor doing online classes. So actually shoot the scene in your living room and send it to us. And if we use you, we'll send you the equipment and the instructions on how to shoot it, and you can just shoot it in your own space.
Whoa. That is wild.
Yeah, so I got two like that, right near the beginning of quarantine and everything, and I shot them, and they were kind of fun to shoot, actually. It was sort of nice to have a real environment to work with. And then as far as in-person auditions, I really, really hated them at first because it's a weird experience. You go into a room, which is usually a hallway outside of some audition rooms, with a bunch of slightly different versions of yourself. And then you go in, you're trying to be charismatic, friendly, quick, make sure you seem you know what you're doing, follow proper etiquette and stuff. And at first that was just always there was always something embarrassing, because you wouldn't really know. You'd be when you're the new guy in the room, especially if you're starting, in your 30s like me, I just wouldn't totally understand everything right away. And now I actually love in-person auditions, just because you get used to it, and then you realize, no, that stuff's a big deal anyway. And then after you've been there a while, like the thing with in person is it supports more experienced actors because you get less tries. You get to go in, you get to try 1 or 2 times, and then you leave. So the more experienced you are, I feel like the more advantage you have in an in-person. And it's fun. And like, once you're like a little confident, there's a casting director there. And if they think you're worthwhile, they'll give you some direction, or you can ask for some direction. And like, you don't quite get that with video. So those are my experiences with the two.
Have you ever walked into like an in-person audition? Because I've seen this in like TV shows and movies a lot, where it's like you're in a room and then you're waiting with like a room full of people who look almost exactly like you, but just a little bit different in each ways. Like, is that like a real life experience?
Yes. Yes. It's really weird. And like, not only that, but a lot of the time they'll give you a little bit of like wardrobe direction. So you're all dressed very similarly too.
Yeah,
that is so weird, dude.
And it's weird too. Like, people get like, you know, it's competition and they're all different types, but like there are always like some really competitive people in the waiting room. And they'll like pull stuff, like they'll like intentionally sit where they know you're trying to sit and stuff like that. It's so weird. It's kind of exciting, but I don't know.
To be the best of you.
Like doing the like, you know, the taped ones. I always think, I mean, I commend actors so much for when they send in these tapes to us, because sometimes it's so hard, man. Like I don't know how they do it. It's like we don't even have lines. It's like it's like a commercial or something, you know. So we're like
people with our commercial.
It's like, hey, there's this commercial. There's no lines, but because it's going to be voiceover, so you got to like, you know, we need you to scream and whatever it is, you know. It's like they've got to act like they're pulling their hair out, freaking out and screaming or something like that. And so we'll get like 20 tapes of people just going all in, and they're in this room like you're describing, maybe by themselves, maybe with one other person taping them, and they're just selling like like a scream. And I'm like, that has to be such a tough experience, because it's like a lot of times they have to do like really ridiculous stuff that's going to work so well in the edit or work really great on set, but having to do it by yourself, you have to like think, all right, how am I going to get into this headspace? Have you had to do any kind of just really weird things like that, really ridiculous auditions or anything like that?
Yeah, I'm really glad you're bringing this up, actually, because this is a great thing for, I don't know exactly about what it's like from your side, but like for actors, like this is like a mystery that we always want to know about. So like, yeah, I have had to do stuff like that. Like even stuff like with no lines, where I'm like, you know, like something happens and I kind of react to it, or maybe, you know, I have to like pick something up and like act like it's really heavy and then like set it over here, and then I have a thought or something, and I'm just like,
right.
The thing is, when in that kind of like, when that's your direction, there's so much freedom. Like I could do anything.
Yeah.
As long as I could sell it. So it's like, you get to this point in your head where you're like, do they want like subtle and realistic? Do they want loud and visual, like physical? And like a lot of the time you just kind of have to like guess, and like it's easier to guess if maybe you have a few pages of script, but sometimes you only get like one paragraph, no context, and they're like, you know, it's like you give a perplexed look. So I'm just like, perplexed. Okay. So yes, like the one I had to do most recently, which I ended up really loving actually, just because I worked out in my head kind of how to feel out the story. But I was auditioning for somebody who's in an airplane, like waiting to like press the button to drop a bomb, and like just looking in the distance at like little explosions and stuff. And that was almost all it was. I said almost nothing for like a minute and a half. But it was cool. And And that one had more context, so it was a little easier, I think, to like sort of figure out ways to like make it real. But I don't know. I want to hear y'all's side of that, kind of like when you give someone, you know, something to do that is just like one little thing. Like, do you know exactly what you're looking for, or do you just kind of want to see what people come up with, or like what?
Yeah, I think usually it's something from the script, don't you think, Brad? There's like one scene or something where we know they're going to have to do this one emotion, or it's like we know that's going to be a pivotal point or something.
I think like, because a lot of times when we're giving like doing those auditions, it's for a commercial, and a lot of times it is the more visual side. So I think the more visual and acting it out, probably the better. But you know, that being said, and it's such a nuanced thing, is that sometimes people can go way over the top of what you're thinking, which sometimes is fine because you're like, well, they kind of get it. They're maybe doing a little bit more than we want, so they can rein it back, you know, easier than maybe you get someone and they're not doing it enough. And you're like, I don't even know if they can go that far, you know? Right. But I mean, we've had some goodness where people just started, you know, if you want to add lines and sound effects, that's fine. But we've had people go completely off script and just start talking and like just made up a completely different commercial idea before. And we're like,
almost, what? It was almost like an infomercial. They just started like narrating themselves
instead of like the screen direction was, you're supposed to pull your hair out. And then they just went left field.
They started being like, are you stressed out? Have you had it up to here? You know, stuff like that. And we're like, there's none of that's in the script.
So yeah, I think my word of advice would be, at least the way we operate, is if you already kind of know, kind of hit the motions that the script's asking for, but I think maybe overact, you know, or do as much visual style of it as you can.
Yeah. A lot of times with the when we're auditioning for movies, like a short film, then it's always like a kind of a balancing act of what sides do we give, because there's points in the story where they need to be, if they need to be at 10 sometimes, but some, you know, there's parts where they've got to be really gentle, like, you know, wait at a 1 or whatever. It's like, what are those scenes? So that becomes part of our job of picking the right moments in the story to give to them so that we can, and so that's why usually we'll give, if it's for a short film, especially, we'll give at least 2 or 3, you know, different points. And that's kind of a lot if you think about a script is only like 8 pages long or something if it's a short, you know, so you're really giving them a good chunk of it. But if it's like the leading part or whatever, you know, you really want to make sure that they're going to be able to do the climax as well as, you know, the moments leading up to it.
Ryan, have you ever had a moment where when you got a side and then you get the role and you're on set and you're like, man, I wish they would have given me this as the side instead, because this tells me so much more about the character than what they had given me initially?
Man, that sounds like an experience I've surely had, though I can't think of an example.
So you've done a lot of stand-in work, you know, in the past. How integral was that to like prepare you for, you know, bigger roles?
It was very helpful. Like if somebody who's just trying to get into acting ever asks me like what I think is, you know, the best route or whatever, I always recommend trying to do some stand-in work for a few months. Just because it gets you on a professional set. You get to watch really experienced actors going through rehearsal. Then you get to almost literally put yourself in their shoes and walk through what they did. You won't get like acting experience so much as just technical, like blocking and movement experience. And you'll understand, you know, the etiquette of being on a set, and kind of like the process, you know, like, okay, be lighting for a while now. They're going to be doing this for a while now. And like, you'll just feel a lot more at home when you're on set because there's a lot to learn.
Yeah.
about how that stuff works. Being on set's a great way to learn.
How does someone go about like becoming a stand-in?
That's a good question. So I think that most people probably do it by just getting on sets a lot in some other capacity. And extra is the easiest way to get on a set. That's how I did it. I just did background work enough, and then I was on a set and somebody was like, we need to stand in for this person. You look like him. And so like that happens all the time, or at least it used to. And so like, if you are there enough and you like keep your eyes and ears open, sometimes you can get a shot,
Yeah.
And
so where do they put out the extras calls? Like, do you find it out online? Do you hear it from friends or what?
Yeah. So there are, if I'm trying to remember what websites I used to go to. The southern.castingcall.com I always liked the best. That had just like kind of the Southeast regional, mostly background casting calls. And it'll have casting calls from like different companies and stuff like that too. So that's like, and once you find one of those, like you'll just learn who all the casting companies are naturally very quickly. Like get on one set and ask like the first person you see will know everything. And then like if you can get your one shot at standing in, then like pay attention so that you know how to do it, and then start applying for stand-in jobs. They pop up all the time too. And the same kinds of places that you could find the background extras casting calls, you can usually find the stand-in casting calls as well if you keep your eyes open.
Yeah. So you recommended doing stand-in work for a few months. I know that was a point where you eventually were like, I need to get out of doing stand-in work and more so just be a full-time actor. Like, do people sometimes kind of fall into that, I guess maybe limbo where they want to stay in that world for, almost ever and kind of lose sight of, the ambition to actually be on screen and not, standing in?
Yeah, that was something, honestly, that I was warned about early on by an actor who was on one of the shows. And, I was still new to standing in, so I didn't really know if that was like true or one person's opinion or what. And after doing it, I did it for, I guess, maybe like 3 years, which is really longer, in my opinion, than you need to do it for. And in that time, I met a number of people who'd been doing it for a few years longer than me. Some of them are still doing it now. And like after enough, so a lot of stand-ins that I had met wanted to be actors. And like the path to being an actor, who supports himself with that career seems to be different for a lot of people. So everybody's trying to find a path, and like that gets you really close. So I think that's the thing. It gets you so close that you feel like if you're just in the right spot at the right time, like everything's going to click. And I do know a number of people who've, gotten like Screen Actors Guild eligibility by getting lines, by being stand-ins. But for the most part, they had to be stand-ins for years before they got that one line. And then like, some of them, have kind of worked with that a little bit. Other ones, like they got that line and then like it's just stand-in world again. And I think the reason is, more than anything, I don't know if I really believe that you get like branded as a stand-in and people know you're a stand-in, so they don't hire you, because the casting directors don't know you're a stand-in. But I think that you're working on set for 12 plus hours every single day. So how do you have time to be an actor if you're a stand-in?
Yeah, it seems like it would be more of on the side of the stand-in or the actor, on the mental side of it. You get comfortable here, you can do this. And then, like you said, the time, there's only so many hours in a day. So people don't realize movies are long days. You're on set for a long time, man. So yeah, it'd be tough to even do auditions, Did you ever have to do auditions like while you were on set? Like, I mean, like go and like Have you ever had to do that? Is that even a thing you could possibly do?
I have done that with other actors, but I have luckily not had to do one while on set. Actually, no. I did do a voice audition while I was on set. But like I literally like took my lunch break and went and sat in my car and recorded it. But other than that, no. I shot, I think one time a guy had an audition, like a last minute thing, and we were still going to be on set. So I was like, let's just set something up over here. You know, better like to have something even if the video quality isn't perfect, than, you know, to miss the audition. So yeah. And there have been times where I've got an audition that's like, you know, due in 4 hours or something like that.
Right.
Yeah, it was, I don't remember what the original question was.
Well, I think it said, I was just thinking about if you could, I think it might've been the voice one that you told me about before, where you had to go and record a voice audition while you were on set for another project. And I mean, there's a ton of downtime usually for like multiple different roles on a movie set. I was going to ask you something about that though, about, I can't remember now. Ellis, you got anything you wanted to?
Yeah, I just had one more question. When we were on the Roads group set, you were talking about doing like that immersive theater where you were like a singing bartender. How is that still? I know amid the pandemic that might have been kind of postponed, but how was that going? How was the training and everything going for that?
So that was like such a unique experience for me. Like, I don't know where an audition for a musical role came from or why, because I have no experience doing that. And like, I swear I was like turning down the audition. I wrote back like, I'm sorry, I think you mistakenly gave me this audition. I don't have any like theater or like a singing experience of that style or anything. And then I was kind of like, whatever, it's an audition. I've done so many of these now. I don't mind making a fool of myself, even if I have to sing live a cappella over Zoom to somebody. So I just did it. And I think I just played it maybe just right, because I just chose the like easiest possible song for me. And like they messed up the audition time. So like when I got the audition, it was supposed to be the next day. And then like they got back to me like 20 minutes later and was like, we actually wanted you to audition in like 20 minutes. So like I didn't really have time to like get too psyched out. And then I did it and was very surprised that they liked it. And I went and I did another audition in person. I had to cold read and improvise a little bit and then sing another song. And they let me choose my song both times, which I think, honestly, if I were ever the person auditioning people for a musical, I wouldn't let them choose their own song, because that's the only reason I got in is because I chose really easy songs.
Yeah.
But then, I got there and like rehearsals were super intimidating because everybody was a super good singer. And like, you know, like Luke and I were talking about how we were like frontmen bands, but I was playing like pop punk. Like you don't have to be able to sing well for that. Like,
Right.
Not like musical.
Not like garage band singer, I feel like.
Right.
So, but you know, like I just like paid super close attention to the experienced theater singers, kind of tried to figure out what they were doing and copy it, and got better really quickly. And we did the show, you know, for a little while, and I stuck on the cast for the first like month and a half of runs, and then parted ways because I won't say like the name of the production or anything, but like you had said, my character was a bartending hooligan kind of. And so like bartending was kind of like a gimmick that my character like actually did do some bartending during the show. And that was kind of cool and everything. But I think, you know, like places like that are also a business, like eventually they start realizing they need to make more and more money. So I started being more and more of a bartender and better, more lucrative bartending job than that. So
yeah,
like, hey, I don't really need another bartending job. So
right.
and they had other people to fill the role that were already knew how to do it and everything. So
Right.
exit gracefully at that point.
Man, but you know what? Like what I think to me, like the thing that people, if a young actor is listening to this or anything, what they could learn from you and what you do really well is just being observant, because I think that any, like all the, growth you've had as an actor, as a person or whatever, and trying to navigate your way in this industry, most of that has come from, just like you were just saying, you didn't know how to be a singer in a musical or whatever, but there was people around you who did, and you watched them and you were learning. I mean, you've done that since you started being a stand-in. You started, before that being an extra, you were watching someone stand in, you learned how to do it. I mean, as a stand-in, you're watching actors and you started learning, I mean, and you stood in for like Paul Rudd, I mean, people like that who are like well-known, obviously really talented. I mean, dude, that's a valuable acting course you got right there.
Mm-hmm.
And you were paid to be there, so that's a super cool route to me. And I think though that, that's the takeaway, for us, for a lot of young, actors or really, I guess, anybody trying to get into the industry, that being observant and say, what can you learn from other people? Because there's just a ton of people with a ton of experience, and you can learn so much if you just pay attention.
Yeah, absolutely. I try to keep the mindset that, you have something to learn from everybody in the room, no matter how experienced, new, smart, or not smart they may seem. There's always something that you can learn. Pay attention.
That's awesome.
So I have a question, Ryan. In your bio that you sent us, you said that you're a fan of mowing your lawn. Does that play into your acting career at all?
I swear it does. And so I've been thinking about this, actually. I'm kind of glad but I don't know if I realized I've been thinking about it. All right. So I was mowing the lawn a couple weeks ago and working on an audition, another different sort of style of audition, in which you write your own scene and then shoot it and send it in. And so I was like, all right, I'm going to try to write the best one I can. And so I had like 3 days. And so I wrote like one the first day, and then I wrote like half of another one. And then I was kind of like, the way I get ideas if I'm trying to write or something is just to like do other things and have like the computer ready. And so the second day I was kind of like, nothing was really coming to me. So I just went and started mowing the lawn. And in like 10 minutes, I'm like, ooh, and like, turn the lawnmower off, run inside. And I was like, I'm just writing the idea down. Next thing you know, I was sitting there for like an hour and I'd written the whole thing. And I was like, all right, I'm going to step away from it for a few minutes.
Yeah.
I started mowing the lawn. 10 minutes later, I was like, ooh, and I jumped off and I went for another one. And I did that 3 times. And I think
your neighbors were like, what's happening? This guy's got to go to the bathroom.
The real question is, did the lawn ever get finished being mowed?
No, it's like half mowed. And several great scenes. But like, yeah, so I think maybe it's kind of like a meditative practice without realizing it, mowing the lawn.
Yeah.
Like, it's loud. You can't really hear anything. So like you're sort of insulated from distractions because you just get used to that hum. It's almost like at home. And then it's sort of like, when you're in the shower, you get good ideas. Yep. Shower wit. When you're mowing,
I was going to say that.
Everything starts to appear. And like, then suddenly I realized I start coming up with questions, like random questions about things, and like it's weird. I guess it's like some sort of like accidental meditative act, but I do think that it plays into my acting just because it plays into that sort of creative side, like with the writing. Maybe it's when I combine it with writing that
yeah. I mean, like any kind of that, people talk about this a lot, but any of those monotonous autopilot activities are super useful when you're trying to be creative. That's why you have the shower ideas, or like you said, Ellis, when you're driving, there's things that you've done so much that you can just kind of do it without thinking about the task at hand so much. Or maybe it is because you are sort of focused on doing it, but in a way that it's like not the forefront of your mind. You're just knowing, I need to go forward with this lawnmower and I'm going to go back the other way. It's pretty easy. It's self-explanatory. So in your head, you're like, I'm going through ideas, and before long, you don't even realize it because those ideas are just subconscious. You know?
Ryan, when you were talking about riding the lawnmower or whatever, it made me think about like what would be a funny skit or short film is this guy, he like gets ideas every time he's mowing the lawn, and then eventually he just mows it down to dirt. He's just keeps on going out there, and it's like not giving them ideas.
Oh, it's like magical almost.
Or it gets to the point that he just keeps on going back, and then law of diminishing returns or something. I don't know. There's an idea. Well, 5 years from now, we'll all write a script.
Something's there.
It's
Lawnmower Man too.
Yeah, it's funny.
So, what? We've obviously worked on a lot of sets together. Like, what's your favorite shoot that we've all worked on together, and maybe a cool memory from that one?
Man. Yeah, there's a lot. I mean, I guess like right now I'm thinking about Sunnyside Drive and jumping off the top of the dock. That's the 2-story dock. That was awesome. That was so fun. Like, just like that set, we got to be out on the lake for, just like a few days back to back, everybody together. And like, so it was almost like going to camp.
Yeah, that was fun.
Did you ever let them shave your head again?
I'll never say never, but
maybe if it was a better paying role.
Man, I remember at one point, you were like, yeah, let's do it. And then me and Luke were driving to somewhere, but Luke was like, I think Ryan, he just mentioned wanting to wear a bald cap instead of us shaving his head. And I was like, no, we got to shave his head. A bald cap will not work.
It was probably that regret. Like, you're like, yeah, we could do that. And then it's like we're getting into pre-production, and then you're like, it's getting closer. Do I really want to shave my head for this short film?
Didn't you it's like you shaved your head, and then right after you had some dental work, right?
Probably.
Because I remember you sent a photo to Luke, and we were editing the movie, and I think you had like your face was swollen, and then like you had probably as long as my hair is right now, or a little bit longer, just like really short hair. You were like, this is the worst look I've had in a long time.
Yeah, right. I got my wisdom teeth removed.
That was it. Yeah.
Oh no,
that's crazy.
Funny times. What about the time all four of us were there? We filmed at Luke's parents' old store. I think almost right before they sold it, right, Luke? And we did a commercial. Yeah. We won't say who for, but it ended up never coming to fruition. Like, we turned in the project, and they were like, "Nah, that wasn't what we were going for," which is super funny. That's probably one of the biggest experiences, I think, in our first, year or so of business, was realizing, every crazy idea you throw out to people, even if they're clients, like, and they might agree to it, but once they see it, it's not what they're really wanting. So it was like having to learn that balance of, you can bring creative ideas to people, but you also have to understand who they are as a brand, and like not try to make them form to whatever crazy inspiration idea that you have. But That was kind of funny shoot because it involved you and then our friend Nick. Nick's in a horse costume and you're like the suave guy. Yeah, Ellis. Ellis was what?
I was the front.
Yeah, had to run off.
Yeah, we had a two-piece horse costume, and Ryan was like in a full suit, just doing like sort of the talking to the camera type thing. It would have been a cool commercial, but it was just a little too far out there for what we were doing at the time.
Yeah,
but yeah,
good commercial. But yeah, I guess just maybe not the tone they were willing to use.
Yeah,
right, exactly. And like you're saying, Brad, that's something you have to learn if you want to make commercials for other people, and you're not just making your own work. You do have to learn, what are they looking for, like what are they about, and is this like really crazy for them? Even if you think it's a really cool idea, you got to make sure you're staying somewhat close to whatever their vision is.
Yeah,
you got to rein yourself in. No pun intended.
Yeah, sometimes.
Yeah, that was a cool shoot though, for sure. Because like I remember we made a cake for it, and then Ryan, you're like eating a slice of cake while talking, and then the horse costume, Ellis is like running off screen, and I think was it just like us four and Nick? Like it was a pretty small
shoot, just us,
but with a lot of moving parts.
I wish we could show people, man.
Yeah.
I didn't have my arms. I couldn't help out. Like my arms were like stuck in the suit.
Oh yeah. So before we wrap it up, I guess what's for you, Ryan, like what's been the silver lining for you during this sort of shelter in place and quarantine pandemic, life? What is something you've done or picked up on or whatever that's been a positive outcome?
Well, like as like a newer actor, many of us, have side jobs, this and that. And normally on like, Friday and Saturday night, I'd be like bartending until like 3-4 a.m. And
wow.
I've had like normal, like healthy sleep cycle now for a good while. And like, it's really, really just great for like emotional health and health. And like, honestly, like, I guess, but like, if I'm really going to take something permanent away from this, it's just the understanding that, however much I might prepare for a part or an audition or that kind of thing, like part of my job is taking care of myself, like emotionally and physically, getting proper amounts of sleep and exercise and that kind of stuff. And like, coming out of this and going back into, whatever worlds we end up going into, like that's going to be something I'm going to have to consider, like working on, maybe making a change around or getting a hold of better, because it's been very clear that I just have a lot more energy that I can use to pull from when I'm doing auditions and that kind of thing, and it's like, even if I were to prepare the same amount as I did when, I'm having to stay up and do those late shifts or whatever, I'll just do better. I just do better this way. So yeah, I guess some perspective is the silver lining, a little maybe better perspective about, how to find that path I was talking about. Everybody's trying to find their own path. So yeah.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
Well, cool, man. What about, do you have your, any like social media or anything that you want people to follow you on, like on Insta? Or
anything you want to plug?
Yeah. My Instagram is This Man Is Lit.
I like that. I like that.
Yeah. You can probably search Ryan Littman and find me, I think. That's
awesome.
You'll see some pictures from some sets, and then also just some pictures from my life, that I put on there.
Cool.
Sweet.
Well, dude, thanks so much for being on the show, man. This is awesome. I hope that we'll get to see you in person again someday soon.
Yeah,
Yes.
you too.
Yeah. Cool.
This is awesome. Thanks again for having me on here. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, man.
Cool to listen to one, and be part of it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, man.
Cool, man. Thanks so much, everybody, for listening, and we'll see you next week.
See?
Totally. See you guys.